Let's just have a quick prayer before we look at these verses. Father, be with us again and speak to us again. Whisper into our very hearts and souls the truths of your word and help us to listen. We ask this in your name. Amen. I don't know if you've done this, but I looked up a friend just recently. I thought, this friend's pretty tech savvy, and I'm sure he'll have a blog or he'll have a Twitter account or something like that. And I thought, I hadn't heard of him or seen of him for some time. So I looked up this fella, and sure enough, he's on Twitter. And I thought I'd just read through, find out what's going on in his life. And this friend from a long time ago from Beach Missions, he's now living in New Zealand. He's now married with 2 kids. And I thought, well, this is all very interesting. And I started to read down, and he's there living as an Englishman or a Brit in New Zealand. And on his blog, his Twitter account, he showed a picture of, and it came up with the phrase, things that leave Britain reeling. You see, things that leave Britain reeling. And I thought, oh, right, he's going to talk about the terror attacks, and he's going to talk, but instead, actually, he was light-hearted, which was refreshing in a way. When things quite bleak at the moment, it was nice to have somebody who was just, so he was explaining to all these New Zealanders things that made Britons real. And his first one, he had a few of these things that came up. His first one was, when your toaster is too small for your toast. All right, hopefully the picture will flick up. When your toaster is, have you ever done that? The top third of your toast is still bread. And if you've had it from the freezer, it's still cold bread. But the bottom 2/3 are actually your... And he's saying to all these people in New Zealand, this is what gets Britain really mad. Okay. All right. And then he went on. He said, when foreigners don't know how to eat a Kit Kat. All right. I mean, everybody knows, don't they? You break off a single stick at a time and you eat them one by one. Is there anybody who doesn't know that? Is there? All right. And he goes on. When your Quality Street tin is smaller, but costs you just as much. Yeah, this is what gets Britain really reeling. Forget about politics and all the rest of it. It's this sort of thing. It's when you only have to take one out of the tin and you can see the bottom of the tin. And it's the fact that the tin isn't tin anymore, it's plastic. God, it doesn't feel the same, does it, when it's... And then his final one was when the super high-tech vending machine, something that's created by NASA that can give you change and even takes notes and credit cards, when the super high-tech vending machine won't give you your Mars bar. I don't know if you've ever had that, and it's hanging there on the vending machine. You think this thing is the state of the art. It's got displays, it's got a touch-sensitive screen, gives you the right change, takes notes and all the rest of it. And then, of course, if you go shaking the thing to get your Mars bar out, of course, an alarm's going to go off and you'll probably be arrested. Wow. Things that make Britons real. Now, none of these things really matter, do they? But they do kind of get to us now and again. That phrase, mustn't grumble, actually means I desperately want to grumble. Just the other day, I was eating the cereal. And at breakfast, most mornings, I have a mix of 2 cereals together. One that's really good for you, because I feel I should have that. And then one that I actually like. And I mix the 2 together. And then when you come to the bottom of the box, and it's always the same, this is what really makes me real. And I grumbled away to Elspeth about this. The bottom 5th of your cereal boxes that you buy is dust, isn't it? It's bits of old wood shavings and all the rest of it that they swept off the floor and they stuck it in the bottom of the box to make the rest look good. And I always get, and then it takes me a lot longer to eat that bit. And in the end, I sometimes screw it up carefully, sneak it in the bin without Elspeth seeing. So she doesn't know that I threw away the bottom, she does now, the bottom 5th of the box. And these are the things that make us grumble. These are the things that make us real. And really, they're things that don't really matter that much, don't they? They don't really matter. But actually, these are the things that sometimes stop us having that thank you attitude. And we're looking here at Luke chapter 17, verses 11 to 19, and that's the title, Thank You. Thank You. The passage is a well-known account. If you've had Bible stories when you were a kid, this is one of those that gets read to you as a kid. 10 people with leprosy come to Jesus. They stand at a distance. Well, why do they stand at a distance? Well, they've got leprosy and they don't want to come near. And they're probably scared that people are going to throw stones at them and tell them to clear off. So they shout from a distance, as it were. They stand from a distance and they ask Jesus to heal them. And Jesus doesn't say, okay, you're healed. He actually says, go and show yourself to the priest. And at that point, they're not healed. And then they turn and they go. Now, the priest probably had a job of being like the local health inspector, and he could give them the all clear. And the priest would need to give them the all clear before they can go back to their kind of ordinary lives. And in this situation, the Bible says they were healed as they went away. As they went, they were healed. And then one man, as he's going, he sees and probably feels that he's healed. And he comes back and he says, thank you. Now, this story to you and me might be so well known that right now you have already switched off. You think, I know this one. All right, I know this story. I know the lesson. The lesson is we all need to remember to say thank you. Move along, closing prayer, final song, quick natter, and we can get on for an early lunch. And some people, you might have switched off now. You're in default mode. Maybe not default mode, but hopefully it's not default mode. You're in that mode of, right, I can just cruise the rest, and quietly on the outside I'll look awake, but really I'm just going to fall, because I know this one. I know this one. But I want you to stop just for a ponder for a moment, because something hit me this week as I was reading this through, and it hit me really hard just how crucial the lesson is in this story. And really there's only one kind of main lesson in this story. And the crucial lesson is, and I think if we miss this lesson, our faith can be shipwrecked. We can be hauled under the water and shipwrecked. And the lesson is never ever see blessings as rights. And that's what comes out in this passage. And I want to develop that. You may say, how does that come out in this passage? But I want to develop that and just look at that. Blessings are wonderful gifts that God, in his love, gives us. And actually, if you look at it in the grand scheme of life, there aren't many rights that we have from God. There are just loads of blessings that we have from God. Blessings are wonderful gifts that God, in his love, gives us. A home, a family, health, friends, each day, every single heartbeat, salvation. And there's loads more of these blessings, these wonderful gifts that God gives us. But we can go through life and we can assume that these gifts are no longer gifts, but they are ours by right. And then we don't see them as blessings anymore. And when we stop seeing blessings as blessings and start seeing them as ours by right, an attitude of gratitude just sweeps, just oozes, as it oozes is the right word, it just ebbs away. And we're no longer thankful individuals for what we have. Now, I do believe very much in human rights. And that's our rights with each other, equality and all the rest, that you go through the human rights. But actually, before God, we don't have, as it were, a set of rights. We just have incredible and amazing blessings. But when we start seeing those blessings as rights, gratitude slowly just ebbs away. And faith can be shipwrecked when blessings are seen as rights. And I've seen this in myself, and it struck me really hard this week. I can become jaded. I can become even resentful towards God when I see things that are his blessings, and I view them as my rights. Let me ask you this question before we go any further. Are you right now jaded and maybe even a little bit resentful towards God? Or have you perhaps been that in the past, jaded and resentful? And if you actually strip everything away and look at it, the reason is you've started to view things as your right. These are mine by right. And actually, when it comes from God, it's a blessing. But when we do see blessings as blessings, the result is that we become gentler and more grateful individuals. And that's the lesson I want to bring out from this passage. And I'm just going to keep doing that over the next few minutes. And I don't want to be as long as normal because I think it's such a simple, straightforward lesson to bring out through these verses. This passage is all about gratitude and recognizing blessings as blessings. As those 10 men with leprosy walk away, they are going to the priest. They start to see and they start to feel that they are healed. I can imagine them pulling back bandages and looking at their skin. And once that skin was all gnarled and scarred and deformed, and now it looks perfectly fresh and normal. I can imagine their joints and they feel in themselves completely different. You know, back then, leprosy was a life sentence, well, more of a death sentence. Today, it's still a terrible disease. It affects something like 100 countries. And it affects the poorest in those countries. A person today diagnosed with leprosy, well, every 2 minutes a person today is diagnosed. And out of those people that are diagnosed with leprosy, 75 children every day are diagnosed with leprosy. Now, thankfully today, if they're in a position where they can get medication, in some cases there can be kind of cure. In many cases, they can live very normal lives. But back then, these 10 men with this disease, back then in Jesus' day, there was no hope, there was no relief. So just imagine what sort of hope they feel when they walk away and they're clean and they're fresh and they're all right. And they're told, go and show yourself to the priest. The moment the priest gives them the all clear, they can get back to a normal life. I can imagine them thinking as they go in, I show myself to the priest, I get a normal life, I can go back to my family. Maybe for the first time in years, these men are looking forward to hugging some member of the family, a wife or a mum or a dad. Yet one of those men realizes something. And he changes direction. And I wonder if the other 9 saw this happen and maybe even question, what are you doing? And the one who changes direction, Luke points out to us, and Jesus points out to us, is a Samaritan. You know, a smelly old Samaritan. If you read the Bible stories, the Samaritans are the bad guys. And yet here, maybe it's the simple fact that the Samaritan is saying to himself, well, the priest isn't going to want to see me. I'm a Samaritan. But I think there's more as well. There's a reality that he thinks, hold on a second, I've got something amazing here. I'm healed. I'm restored. There's a right approach. I need to go back. He realized, he changed direction, and he goes back. You know, the Jewish people had the very best of God, didn't they? They had his promises. They'd seen him deliver them as a nation. They'd seen him plant them in the promised land. He had won wars for them. He had done miracles for them. From the plagues in Egypt to right now, 10 men healed with leprosy. And yet, the people of Israel have a history of grumbling and resisting and rebelling against God. Israel had developed a mentality of taking God for granted and not thanking him. And the lesson for us to think about is, are we doing the same? Are we actually developing a mentality of taking God for granted and never thanking him? Why? I think Israel saw these blessings from God, these amazing things that God had done for them, no longer as blessings, but theirs by right. So we need to be careful. When we look at these verses, we need to be careful. We never assume that blessings are our rights. And then just to try and reinforce that, the second thought here I want to bring out is that faith and gratitude are linked. I'd go as far as to say that there is no real faith, Christian faith, without gratitude. Because gratitude is what motivates the Christian's faith and love for God. It's out of gratitude. I don't know if you've noticed this in the story before, and it struck me this time. When this man, this Samaritan man, comes back to Jesus Jesus doesn't compliment him or commend him for coming back. And I think, why? Jesus doesn't throw his arms around him and say, well done. You're the one that said thank you. He doesn't say that. He actually responds by saying, hold on, weren't there 10 of you? Where are the other 9? And then in verse 18, he says these words, very poignant words. Has no one returned except this foreigner? Why does Jesus not compliment this man? Why does Jesus not commend this man? And I think it is because this man simply is doing what is the right response. He's simply doing what he should have done. He isn't doing something wonderful and amazing. It's not like, the story of the centurion, the Roman centurion, who shows such incredible faith that when Jesus says, I'll come to your house, he says, you don't need to. And it says Jesus was amazed by that. It doesn't say Jesus is amazed here. It doesn't say Jesus is amazed here because really this man is doing really the basic requirement, the simple thing he's needs to do, which is simply to say thank you. I'll tell this story again. I've told it many times, and you probably remember that I've told it many times. But there's a young boy on the bus, and across from him is an old fella with a brown paper bag. The man dips into the brown paper bag and he pulls out an orange. He starts to peel the orange, and as he starts to peel the orange, the whole bus fills with the smell of the orange. Have you ever done, smelt the orange? Oh, yeah. And this little lad is looking at this and thinking, oh, I'd like an orange. And the old man, he then thinks, he sees the lad looking, almost salivating, and he offers the boy an orange. So he passes it across the bus to the little boy, and the boy grabs it. All right. And the mother, who is watching all this, immediately bangs him and says, what do you say? And the boy ponders for a moment, and then he passes it to the man, and he says, peel it. Now that is not what the mother was looking for, was it? And we all know that. The mother is simply looking for a thank you. Because what is that? That is just the right response. It is just the right response. And that needs to be our response for the blessings that God gives us. And I think that is why this man is not commended. He's not complimented. Jesus doesn't make a big thing of what this man has done as if it's something fantastic. It isn't fantastic. It's just a basic requirement of what he should have done. He should have said thank you. And the other 9 should have said thank you too. And the other 9 weren't foreigners. In fact, they had lived with God's goodness. So they should have been the first ones to say thank you. But actually, it was the other way around. Last week, Phil spoke to us on verses, 7 to 10 were some of his verses. And it talks about a servant and a master. And when the master comes home, does the master cook the dinner then for the servant after a hard day's work? No. The servant sorts out the meal because that's the servant's job. And the point that the passage is bringing out is that we are not the masters, we are the servants. And serving God is actually, and I think Phil brought some of this out, serving God is actually the best, the greatest privilege that we as individuals can have. We're involved in something eternal. And what he's bringing out there is the right response for a servant of God is to serve, of want to serve. And the right response for these 10 people with leprosy is to respond with thanks for what they've been given, for the blessing. Look at verse 15 and 16. This is how the Samaritan responds. This is the right response in those circumstances. One of them, it says in verse 15, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. What did he do? He did 3 things. He came back. Now that doesn't, so you say, well, that's nothing amazing. Well, it is amazing because 9 others didn't. He came back. He praised God. And there was no sort of, it was big and it was loud and it was straightforward. And he wasn't ashamed of what had happened. He wanted everybody to know. He praised God. And then what else did he do? He threw himself at Jesus' feet and what? He thanked Jesus. It was very visual. It was very real. It was very straightforward. It was just the right response. What's happening here in this story, this little bit particularly, is a clear picture of what happens when a person becomes a Christian. What's happening to the man is he is sick and he is dying. And then he recognizes that Jesus has the power to sort everything out. So he asks to be healed and restored. He is healed and restored. And then he's filled with gratitude and praise. And in a very real way, that is what happens to a person when they become a Christian. We see that we are actually sick and dying. That is our spiritual reality. Many people never, ever perceive that. But before God, that is how we are, sick and dying. In fact, Ephesians chapter 2 says we are dead in trespasses and sins. What happens then is we recognize God at work. We ask Jesus to heal and restore. We are healed, restored, and forgiven. And then the response should naturally be that we are filled with gratitude and praise to God for what he has done. That should be our response. Verse 19 then says this, and this is the last thing, as it were, that Jesus says to this man. Verse 19, rise, go, your faith has made you well. The other 9 never heard those words. The other 9 men with leprosy never heard Jesus say, your faith has made you well. What is he saying? He's saying, your faith did this. You put your trust in me, and now you are healed. He's saying God's power came prompted by your faith placed in me. Now, the other 9 had placed faith in Jesus, because when Jesus said, go and show yourself to the priest, they turned and they went. And at that point, they are listening to what he said, and they're doing what he asked. But this man did more. There was a sense of gratitude afterwards. In some versions, it says this, your faith has saved you. Or it will say that your faith has healed you. And it's talking more completely. It isn't just that you are now free of leprosy. Actually, it is now that you're saved. You're right with God. God's power prompted by our faith can achieve so much. I read just the other day, and it's stuck with me, this little phrase. There is nothing that 2 people can't do if one of them is God. I thought, that's brilliant. I thought, I must remember that. I must write that down. There is nothing that 2 people can't do if one of them is God. And in this situation, this man's situation was absolutely hopeless, wasn't it? But 2 people, him and God, and everything was put right. So to just finish off, to sum up, faith and gratitude are linked. Faith without gratitude will naturally become jaded and even resentful towards God. Maybe pressure and circumstances overpower us at times. And we're so involved in dealing with a difficulty or whatever it is that we lose sight of our gratitude. We forget how much God has given us. But faith with gratitude will want to serve, will create in us gentler, more thankful individuals who just want to give back. So faith and gratitude are linked. And then the third thing is we must never assume, never see blessings as if they are rights, ours by right. You trace through the history of Israel, and again they make this mistake. Here, the only one who returns and shows any gratitude is a Samaritan. It's almost as if the people of Israel have got it so deeply ingrained in their psyche, in their thoughts, that they don't need, as it were, to say thank you, because this is ours by right. And we must be careful never to get that sort of attitude. I don't know whether to finish with this or not, but I came across this little quote by A.A. Milne, the writer of Winnie the Pooh. And I hope this doesn't take away from other things, but this is what Piglet said. All right? So Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. And hopefully we've got it, we can flick it up. Piglet noticed that even though he had a very small heart, it could hold a rather large amount of gratitude. Now, I know that's comic, and Piglet doesn't really exist, but actually I think that's a great attitude, a great quote. I might just have a small heart. I may not have as much as the person next to me, but actually I have a heart that holds a great deal of gratitude. My prayer for myself and my prayer for you today is that you and me will cultivate an attitude of thankfulness, ensuring that gratitude underpins our faith. Maybe we need to make time to reflect. As a leadership team, we've been doing these glances of grace, I think we've called it, where we've just seen something good and gracious happen in the church, or really mainly in the church, and we've just talked about those things. We've talked about different things where people have been positive or wonderful. And as one of those glances at grace, we shared the fact that Jane came up the other Sunday and talked about Morgan and Bailey coming along and singing the songs and taking in what was said and understanding the truths. And we said that's just a glance at grace, God's grace and love working within us as a church. And actually that helped me get away from being resentful and worn out and jaded, and helped me think about being truly thankful and grateful. You know, Bible teaching is really important, isn't it? It's really important that we know our Bibles, what the Bible says. To understand what the character of God is like, to know him, we need Bible teaching. But at the same time, we need to be people infused, filled with praise. It is just as important. Because God doesn't want us just to know him and understand him. God wants us to honor him and to love him. And that's why we need to spend time together praising God.